Hello and welcome to our panel today. My name is Barb and I'm a librarian at Billings Public Library. And I'd like to thank Continual and Samantha Bryant for organizing this panel today on small presses. As we know, there's a lot of ways for authors these days to get their work out to readers, and small presses can be a really valuable piece of that publishing puzzle. So without further ado, please welcome Samantha Bryant, who will moderate this panel. Thanks.
So hi, I'm Samantha Bryant and I'll be our moderator today. And as Barb said, we're here to talk about small presses as a publishing option. So I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and as they do to tell us a little bit about their relationship with small presses. For myself, I spent about 2 years after I decided to take my writing life seriously submitting to Big Five publishers and collected all of 2 rejections because that's how slow the process goes with those guys. And I was frustrated, but I didn't feel ready to be an indie publisher because that requires a lot of skills that I did not have. So that's when I started looking into small presses, and I have been published by several small presses since, and I've had despite one very bad experience, have had mostly good experience. So how about Michele? Can we start with you?
Hi everyone, I'm Michele Tracy Berger and I write across the speculative fiction universe, but most of what I write tends to have an element of horror. And I have been published primarily with small presses. All of the people on this panel besides Samantha have published me. And I have been, particularly with anthologies, but also my novella Renew You is with Falstaff Books, but was with a much smaller press, which I'll talk about at some point. And I have been traditionally published with some anthologies, but I would say my experience with small presses has been much more generative and dynamic, and I have strong relationships with editors, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that as one of the pros.
Okay, John, how about you?
I'm John Hartness. I am the author of a couple dozen novels and collections, and I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books. We're an independent press based in Charlotte, North Carolina, founded in 2016. And since then, we've published about 200 titles, including, I think we're up to 6 titles from Samantha at this point. 7th, it will be a collection and it's coming soon. So keep your eye on Amazon. If you follow her on Amazon, you'll get notified. And also we're happy to have published Renew You by Michele, as well as R.S. Belcher, A.J. Hartley, David B. Coe, Gail Z. Martin, a host of other people. I started off self-publishing because when I decided to take my writing career semi-seriously, I sent out queries to agents, and I sent out 6. And after about 2 months, when no one had replied, I thought, well, this is ridiculous. This is taking far too long. I had no clue how publishing worked, but I had read a blog and I heard that you could make a boatload of money self-publishing. That was incorrect, but I spent 3 years or so self-publishing. Then I sold a series to Bellbridge Books, which is a larger end small press based out of Memphis. And I have worked with them for 9 novels now in my Black Knight Chronicles series. And then in 2016, I founded Falstaff Books because I didn't have enough to do just writing and self-publishing and publishing through a small press. I decided I should publish another 50 or 60 books a year. So since then, I have published a lot of great people and been very fortunate with the quality of people who are interested in working with us, not only on the writer side, but also on the production, editorial, and cover design side.
Yeah, I think at this point, Falstaff Books is awfully large for a small press. Like you have a staff and you have a large number of books put out every year.
We're not allowed to submit work to a couple of small press annual competitions because we published too many books. So that's actually, when I started, I always referred to us as a micro press because it was just me running things. And then someone said exactly that on a panel when they said, "You've published 75 titles in 2 years. You can't call yourself that anymore." I said, "Oh, okay." But yes, that's why I've started saying independent press, because after the first 100 titles, it is hard to say small press anymore.
Mhm. Okay. Jason, how about you? Tell us about Perspective Press and you.
Okay. I'm Jason Graves, and I founded Perspective Press back in 2015, so a year before John founded Falstaff. We're older, but we're much smaller. We only have about 35 books out, and that's just because our production schedule is so much leaner than what John's been able to achieve. So kudos to John. So I started out also independently publishing my first couple of novels, and then I got picked up by a small press that is no longer in business, which is very common story. Small presses tend to come and go. So the fact that John and Perspective, or Falstaff and Perspective, are both 5 and 6 years old respectively is pretty impressive for small presses. But yeah, after a few years with that small press, I decided that I wanted to run my own show. So I founded Perspective, and you know, we put out several good novels, several anthologies so far. Samantha, you're in one of our anthologies, and Michelle's in another one of our anthologies. And you know, got a couple of folks here who might like to join in the fun.
My
talk about that.
It's pretty open, pal. You just email me.
All right. But yeah, that's it. We're coming out with a couple of anthologies this year and several good books. And I got my first agented book published this year. So yeah, go.
That really is a landmark feeling, even when you just get through the process of signing a contract and going through that with an agent for a press our size. It's one of those things, you check it off on the list.
Absolutely. Yep. And the book is selling really well, so I'm happy with that.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah.
Rachel, you want to tell us a little bit about you and Crone Girls Press?
Uh-oh. Okay.
So I also started off writing before I even started Crone Girls. And I have I have a romance novel and a short story with a small press. I had my werewolf series that I'm still working on with a small press. I've since gotten the rights back. And I worked on a series as a contributing editor, a series of charity anthologies for Writer Punk Press, which is, I guess you would call like a micro press for charity. And so that all I had some really good experiences and I had some learning experiences. And then about a year ago, Crone Girls Press published our first anthology.
Nice.
And that came about because I found some stories that I really wanted to publish, and they weren't mine. And the person that I was telling to submit the stories refused to submit them. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to publish them in an anthology. Reached out to people, got our first anthology published, and that was just so much fun. I decided to do it for the rest of my life. But yeah, we're about to hit our 1 year anniversary almost exactly. At this point, we have 3 full-length anthologies. The last one of which I think I have stories by Samantha and Michele, both of which are terrific stories. So people should definitely check those out. And had a chance in this last anthology to work with an author who was, it was a work in translation. And then we're about to launch this week a mini anthology of 3 novelette/novella length horror pieces. And one of those was a gentleman who has an agent. So again, that was a very interesting experience. I wasn't really expecting to work with an agented writer our first year of publishing, but there you go. And again, so a lot of these experiences are really good. Some of them are, again, like I said, are learning experiences. I learn a lot just by knowing other folks who have been doing it for longer. So a lot of this panel may be me just going, yes, what those folks over there said.
Well, I think you're spot on that one of your best sources for information is to talk to other people. Other writers, in my experience, are so generous with a willingness to share their experience, to try to help you avoid problems that they ran into. More so, and I'm also a teacher, and I'm also a mother, and I've been a coach and various other things. And so far as supportiveness of my colleagues, writing, hands down, those people have my back and want to see me succeed, and don't seem to see any success I get as some kind of competition for success they could get. Right? Readers could read all of us. It could totally happen.
Yeah.
It's not the thing I say all the time is it's not pie. There's not a limited amount of success. We really do publish over 52 titles in a year, and we still can't keep up with some of the super avid readers. The same person could read everything we produce, everything Jason produces, everything Rachel produces in a year, and still want more. So it's not a competition. Everyone who purchases a book anywhere in the long run is good for my business because they are reading and they are paying for the content. They're not, or they're going to a library, considering our venue, but the library buys it. Anytime that happens, it's good for me because it means that people are predisposed to consume story.
That's the thing too I love about our community. We really do have a community of small presses and independent publishers in North Carolina and in South Carolina. And that's what I really love about that is we've got each other's backs and we build each other up, I think that anybody who tries to treat themselves as an island and is in competition with other small publishers and independently published authors is setting themselves up to fail, because it really is the collaboration that we can achieve together that helps build our businesses and helps build our reader base and helps build our brands.
And some books just aren't good fits for some presses.
That's true.
I've sent Jason stuff because the manuscript was too similar to titles we already had in the line, and I didn't feel like I could adequately market the book. I have sent people Rachel's way because they were women writing horror, and I'm like, you should talk to Rachel because she's awesome. I've definitely sent people towards Chris Kennedy because he's a mill sci-fi guy. So
right. Yeah.
The ability to, a rising tide really does lift all boats. That's not just a saying. It's something that I've seen time and again in multiple industries over my life. So there's no reason. I don't have competitors. I have other people who write and publish things, but there's no competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to touch on that, like, John, you publish a lot of sci-fi, paranormal, spec fic, whereas, and you don't publish anything, you don't publish young adult, you don't publish nonfiction, and that's something that Perspective does. And obviously a small amount, given our size, but that's the great thing is if I get something that I think would work better for John, I can send them his way. And like he said, he's sent stuff to me or sent people to me with their projects. So yeah, it really is all about collaboration and keeping each other lifted up.
And I think that leads into talking about for aspiring writers who haven't yet started a career and are looking at working with small presses. One of the things you should look at is what does that press publish? Because especially with small presses, there tends to be a pretty good definition of what that press does. They are not trying to publish all the books of all the kinds and have their fingers in all the different kinds of pie. They have a specific kind of pie that is their brand. And I think that's something a lot of aspiring writers don't do enough at the beginning, is look into who you're submitting your work to and make sure that your work would be welcome. And you can collect a lot of rejections that can be disheartening just because you didn't send it to somebody who is the right person for your work. Um, so I know Jason mentioned briefly that he'd worked with a small press that folded. And so that's a risk, right? When you're working with a small press. And I know that Michele had this experience, and I also had this experience. I don't know if John and Rachel did. I'll ask them here in a minute. But for me, I think the risk is still worth it because of the pros that go with it. So even knowing that when you're working with a smaller business, there's a higher chance that it's going to fold and that you'll have to start over in some way in the future. What are some reasons that you would work with a small press? Now, maybe I'll pass this to Michele first as the other writer who's not a publisher on the panel.
Yeah, I think, well, I had the experience of my first novella was with Book Smugglers, which was a wonderful micro press, and then they folded. But they were very supportive in saying, look, you should seek out regional publishers to think about your work. And I would just say a couple of things in terms of someone aspiring. Understanding that small presses are a labor of love, like you've heard from people on the panel, and so you're going to get much more kind of attention and support in terms of working on your project, but you also need to come ready to engage with them as a professional. So I think it's a dual match that works really well. I think one of the other pieces of working with small presses too is that sometimes you can approach people, obviously in the moment that we were living in, where people were going to cons or in other kinds of conferences, you're more likely to be able to talk to someone from a small press and kind of build a relationship prior to submitting your work. And then, the actual I think the benefits working with a small press is that small presses, in my experience, have been very active in setting up professionalization pathways for writers. So being in a Facebook group, understanding what happens during a launch, what are your expectations, what are the publisher's expectations for in an anthology, everyone pulling their weight. But if you're a new writer, you may not know how to do those things, like what is a platform? How do you support other writers with a platform? It's not just about supporting yourself. And you can learn that. And I think that's a really valuable thing that I'm not sure people always get in traditional publishing and or in traditionally published anthologies. I've seen this in particular with small press anthologies.
Yes, I know Michele and I both have a piece in an anthology from another small press. We're in Slay, Stories of the Vampire Noir from Mocha Memoirs. And Nicole Givens-Kurtz, who's the publisher and owner of that company, has done a fabulous job with that education aspect of teaching the authors who maybe don't know much about marketing and getting their work out there, how to help the project be successful. So yeah, that's a good point, is that small press, working with a small press, besides just getting your work out there, is also a great opportunity to learn about how the whole industry works. So Rachel, how about you? What are some reasons people should work with a small press?
Well, I think Michele's point, remember I said I was going to just point to people and say yes what they said. So Michele's point is so valuable that I'm going to reiterate it, and that is, it is a learning experience, and it can be a very positive learning experience. I'm doing my best to make it a positive learning experience for my authors. I've worked with presses that we signed the contract and did the edits, and then that was the last I heard until the book launched. And then I was like, okay, well, that was exciting. On to the next thing. But I prefer to create a lot of engagement. And for that, sometimes I find myself talking to some of the newer writers like, hey, I know that maybe you only have 5 Twitter followers, and that's totally okay. But when I tag you in something, like, retweet it and engage with it, because you're letting other people know where they can find you and what kind of stuff you're doing. And sometimes it's just that little bit of, hey, this is something that you can do. This is an opportunity that starts to turn on the light bulbs, that starts to get people to have some ideas about how they could go and do some promotion. And so in addition to the learning experience, the opportunity to be in a community, because we're all writing alone in our rooms. And what a small press gives us is an opportunity to have almost like a little workplace. We have a Facebook group for Grown Girls Press authors, and I'm trying to make it like a little water cooler. Like, hey, don't forget, if you've got, you know, this going on, check this out. Hey, here's a resource for authors. You know, here's a blog article about this, which actually reminds me I should probably go post a couple more resources. But yeah, that's the opportunity to meet up, to link up with people and figure out what they're doing, and, you know, crib their notes and vent in a safe place, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, those connections were really important to me. Like, you know, like Michelle, I worked with a small press that folded. My experience didn't go nearly as nicely as hers. You know, the press that folded didn't handle it beautifully and professionally and take care of their authors. They just kind of ghosted us and slowly disappeared. Right. So, but I was able to get my rights back. And during the years that that company had my books, I had been out connecting with other authors and other publishers and stuff. So when I got my rights back, I already knew John. And John and I had already talked about how if I got my rights back, Falstaff Books might be interested in publishing them because they do publish superhero, and they didn't have anything that was like my work already with the menopausal superheroes. It's, you know, it's kind of just me in that genre. And I wouldn't have had that chance except for that I got to know a lot of other writers through these projects, and being part of Facebook groups and participating on panels and these kinds of things are how I got to know these people. So Jason, how about you? What's a reason people should work with small presses? What's good about it?
Well, as you guys have mentioned already, the sense of community is important. Actually, I think it's one of the most important things too. I agree in that. Along with that, there's a sense of gravitas that comes with being published. You know, my first year running the publishing company, that was sort of a specious argument on my part, perhaps. But now that we're approaching our 6th birthday, I could honestly say, yes, if I publish, or if we publish your book, you know, there's something behind that, because we have history, we have success. And so there's that aspect of it. You know, I've been approached by people. What's that?
I was going to say, even when the press you're working with is like a one-person operation, that's still one person who isn't you, who believed in your work enough to put some work behind it. And that is
Exactly.
worth something.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a body of work that's put into the body of work, as it were. And that's what separates, I think, the presses that are going to survive versus the presses that won't survive, is that the ones who love what they're doing and are doing it for the love. I don't get rich doing this. In fact, obviously, but you know, I focus on every project as being the most important project when it's in front of me. It's not something that I'm going to crank out in a week and then dump on and then jump to the next project. I craft a quality product, and I have people that I work with who also are committed to that. So yeah, there's the someone who believes in your project, the gravitas of being with a press that's successful. You know, I've had people come up to me at conferences and writers events, and they ask me, what would be the benefit of me publishing with you versus self-publishing? And my answer to that always is, if you are considering self-publishing, you should self-publish, because you're not the kind of person who's going to be happy with publishing through a small press. So the people who publish through small press are the people who want what a small press offers.
Well, I've also found that authors do a bit of both. they call it being a hybrid now, right?
Yes.
Where you publish
Yeah.
some of your work yourself and you have other work with publishers separate of you. That's something I'm looking at from my own career, is because now that I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, yeah, thereabouts, I've learned a lot. And
Mhm.
so I maybe could successfully put together an indie project, and I've got a little bit of a platform and a little bit of a readership, right? So I've got a better shot at making a success of it now from what I've learned. But I still value all my relationships, and for some projects, I'm looking for that support and help. So it doesn't mean that everything I write from here on out, I'm going to indie publish. Just means I might consider it for some things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the difference though is that's something that you're pursuing. You want to have those both of those aspects. Some people approach me and they're like, they're adversarial. It's like, what can you do for me that I can't do for myself? And it's like, well, this isn't a conversation I want to have with you, because, I mean, I'm willing. If somebody
Adversarial.
wants to know what I can do
Sorry.
for them, honestly, and not confrontationally, I'm happy to talk with them. But some people are just trying to, whatever.
Right.
Send them a link to this panel. Be like, there you go, check it out.
And that's more proof that Jason's nicer than me, because I'll look somebody in the face and say, I can edit your work and you can't.
Right. That is another something we haven't talked about, just the level of support around editing and skill-based work that happens with a smaller press that
Right.
I think is really valuable. I would say the other thing for really newly emerging writers, if you you have a story in someone's anthology and you show up in ways that Rachel and other folks have talked about, there's a chance that you may be tapped to submit if they do another anthology within your arena, and that also can be a platform for you to work with that editor and team again, and then you might even pitch them an actual project, a novella or a novel down the line, and you're now you're on a pathway because you have a relationship with that editor. So it could be fruitful for new writers over a longer period of time.
I will jump in to say that is absolutely a factor in some of the decisions that I've made regarding the new series of novellas and novelettes that we're doing, as well as some of the folks that I've contacted to be like, hey, we're having an open call next year and I would really like to see something from you. It's that willingness to partner and develop and use your platform to amplify other voices, not just the presses, but your fellow anthology authors, that says to me, working with this person will be a fun and mutually beneficial experience, because as much as I'm publishing for the love of it, I would also at some point like to publish for breaking even on my balance sheet of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think sometimes publishing gets a bad rap, and they'll be like, it's not about your quality, it's about who you know. And people say that as a bad thing. And I could see where it could be, but it's also about, you are people who've chosen to publish books. Whoever you take on are people you're going to have to continue to work with. So if I am a major diva and every interaction with me is a pain, why would you publish me again, right? Like, you're like, okay, well, we've got her in this one anthology, but we're not accepting anything else because she's been a pain, right? And that's just natural humanity.
If I don't like someone well enough to sit across a table and share a meal with them, I won't work with them.
Yeah.
Because
And that's what I was getting at with what I said.
Yeah.
I'm being proactive. If somebody's coming at me like, what can you do for me? I'm like, nothing. Have a nice day.
Absolutely.
If I'm at a bar at a con and somebody's telling me about their project and I think it sounds interesting, I really want to talk to them about that, So
I have absolutely been accused of only publishing my friends. I respond to that with, look who my friends are. Because when I have friends who are published by multiple other people, then obviously I'm not the only one who thinks they're awesome. And one of the things editorial was the thing I was really going to focus on. I'll lay it out here small presses do better editorial than New York. If you're a
Yes.
new or new-ish writer, especially if you're a mid-list author, and for people who aren't familiar with industry terms, there are bestsellers and everyone else is the mid-list. Oh, and then there's fired. But everyone else who has contracts is the mid-list. It doesn't matter if you're the very bottom of what's sustainable profit-wise or just bumping up, or maybe you occasionally hit the lower tiers of a major list. You're mid-list. If you're in that group, which is 90% of the people who are published,
Mhm.
you'll get better editorial from a small press because New York has farmed out a huge amount of their in-house editorial over the past decade, and they've farmed it out to freelancers, and they've shifted a lot of that work onto agents. So the agents now are often the frontline editors for work. And personally, I believe in one of Heinlein's rules, which is accept work except by editorial decree. And the person who makes the editorial decree is the person who's paying me for the story. So the person who gets paid off the story, I'll listen. I will absolutely value your opinion. But when Joshua Palmatier from Zombies Need Brains sent me back editorial notes for the anthology I did for him earlier this year, my battery is low and it is getting dark, available now at all retailers. I looked at it and I was like, okay, Joshua is paying for this story. We will cut what he wants me to cut. There were also really good edits, and the story was too long when I sent it and I knew it. So
the gift of editing is a really important one. And, if you're going to indie publish, one of the skills that you're going to need to have or hire is editing. And that's trickier than it sounds. Like when I started working on what I do intend to be an indie project one of these days, I hired some editing, and it wasn't good editing because anybody can put their name out there and say, yes, I'm an editor. So I'll have to pay again to have it edited again, because the feedback I got was not helpful. And I have enough ownership in my own work and faith in my own vision for what it should be to look at it and go, no, that won't actually make this better. And the same with covers. Yes, anybody can make a cover, but there's a big difference in what those covers look like, and covers are such an important part of book editing. So like when I was looking at small publishers and who I was going to submit my work to, I totally judge you guys by your covers, because that's how the readers are going to judge you guys.
that's
Right?
good. It's like my third biggest budget line item. So I'm really glad that that people are paying attention. It's salary. I think it's, well, royalties, salaries, editorial covers. So it's the fourth biggest line item in my budget each year. But I say often that you don't work with a small press to get rich. You certainly don't run one to get rich, but you don't publish through a small press to get rich. You publish with a small press to learn how to be a published author and to learn how to go to conventions and comport yourself on a panel or comport yourself in the convention bar. You learn how to get on Zoom panels for a library 2,500 miles away from your home and how to do that work, how to go through a multi-step editorial process, when to dig in your heels and say, no, this cover is not going to work, and when to say, okay, fine, you win, you're writing the check, you're going to win. All of those are important skills. And the other side of this, and the thing I tell a lot of my authors, especially the brand new ones, are my goal is for you to spend a few years working with me, learn how to be a published author, go sell a couple of books to New York, make the Times list, and we'll all get paid on your backlist. Because the royalty structure for a small press is a better royalty structure than a major press. You're also typically not looking at getting an advance. So there's no money up front for you as the writer, but your back end is a bigger slice. So then if you're super successful and your pie gets bigger, your slice gets bigger.
Yep.
That's literally what you said to me, John, when we sat down and talked. He's being very accurate there.
Yeah.
I do want to say something though, just about cover, because working with a small press, as John mentioned, you're more likely to have some input on novellas and longer work on the cover, which is not necessarily true. When I've talked to friends who are more traditionally published, that's not always the case. So that kind of, again, connection and interaction and relationship that you have is very different.
You know, whether we're talking about the cover or other aspects, one thing I've always appreciated about my small press experiences is that I can get to the head honcho. I don't have to deal with 7 layers of secretary who are trying to blow me off and not let me talk to the person in charge. I can go on Facebook and I can chat any of y'all up and and I get straight to the head honcho. And there's something to be said about that, about losing those layers of bureaucracy and just being able to connect more directly.
And with us, you've worked with us long enough to know that while I may be the head honcho, Melissa, my associate publisher, is the one you need to actually talk to get things accomplished.
Yes, we run the idea by you, and then we run the logistics of it by Melissa. Yes.
That's why I pay her.
We've talked quite a bit about some of the good things about working with small presses. So let's talk about the cautionary side of things. And, you know, you don't have to name names of bad experiences you've had or anything like that. But what are some things to watch out for? You know, what are some warning signs for people considering working with a small press?
Make sure you're going to get paid. Talk to people who have published with that house. Talk to people who have published with them for multiple years and people who have published with them recently, and find out if you're going to get paid. We're at the point now where we have picked up, I think we're close to 20 titles in our line that I have reissued because writers have requested their work, the right to their works back from other houses because those houses were not fulfilling the contract. You have to, I will absolutely tell you that we are going to pay you on time, every time, no problems, never. I do pay on time. I do occasionally make Excel errors, but you should talk to, if you want to know if we pay on time, ask Samantha and Michele, ask any of our authors. You have to vet the press just like you're out buying a used car, just like you're doing a background check on somebody who's dating your kid. I don't have kids. I just assume that that's something that you would do in this age of technology.
I like the idea of somebody approaching you because they want to date your cat, though.
Hey, you know, he hasn't shown up yet. I'm surprised. Usually as soon as he hears multiple voices on Zoom, he's right here on the desk.
One thing I say to watch out for is churn. There are small publishers out there that are colloquially known as book mills, whose sole business practice is to turn a book as quickly as possible with the minimum amount of work invested so that they can sell those books to the author and then move on to the next. And so if you've got a small press that's putting out a lot of titles in a year, and especially if they're going from, say, signing a contract one month to having the book published the next month, those are things to watch out for. Yes, I'm not going to name names, but there are a number of those.
No, it happens. I mean,
now,
we publish a ton of books.
Go ahead.
We publish a ton of books in a year.
Yes,
but
you're different.
Just said that's really important. It takes us 10 to 14 months.
Exactly.
To turn a book around.
Yeah.
It took us a while to publish Samantha and Michele's titles, and those were reissues. And we didn't turn those around within 90 days. So But yes, you're
And
absolutely.
John, the other thing that sets you and us apart too is that we're actually out actively marketing these books and doing post-production support with the authors. We're doing advertising. We're going out to conventions and book festivals. We're actively marketing our authors' books. And these book mills do not do that. They live solely to get money from authors who buy copies of their own books to go out and sell themselves. So if you see that kind of stuff, and we know who these people are, so yeah. If you're ever in doubt, ask covertly at a con, or slip us a note.
Now, when I talked about the generosity of other authors in my life, that's part of that generosity is direct and honest opinions about who they've worked with. And maybe they
Absolutely.
don't want to say it like on a panel that's going to be presented at the library because, then you open yourself up to retribution. But when two people are talking to each other, I've always found other authors will be honest with me about what their experience has been. So I
Right.
know Rachel started to answer this question too. So does your comment still apply?
I think so. And it was based off the comment of a marketing budget. And so, like I said, I've had a couple of different experiences, but I mean, here I am a micro press publishing horror in a pandemic. And I still have enough money to run. They're not huge ads, but there are still Amazon and Facebook ads associated with each launch, plus a ton of social media promotion, that some of which is I'm making it using Canva and just my own experience of picking out good quotes and things like that. And so behind the scenes, I'm getting stuff ready to go, et cetera, et cetera. If you ask the small press, are they going to do that? Are they going to give you that attention? Or are they going to say, well, I have 70 bucks and what would you like me to do with it? No, don't ask the author that. They're going to be like, send it to me. Um, does the press though, and what I'm getting is, do they have that promotion experience, or do they have somebody who has that promotion experience? For me, when I first joined the Army, I was a public affairs specialist and later NCO. And I learned how to write a press release, what makes a good photo, how to craft a story or a blog post. And all of those skills I'm now using in the service of my authors. And so for me, that's like, now I go to a small press and I'm looking at, I look at their submissions page and I look at their covers and their other authors. And I think to myself, okay, now what does it say that they offer prospective authors? Or are they asking me how many followers do I have and what I'm planning to do? Which is a fair enough question, but if that's the only question they're asking and they're not saying what they can bring to the table, that might be something to just take note of and be aware of as you go through the process of deciding whether to contract with them or not.
Yeah, it's not that different from interviewing for a job or choosing a partner in any aspect of your life, that you've got to look at what they're bringing to the table and how it meshes with what you're bringing to the table and whether you're a good fit. And there are publishing houses that have absolute predatory practices and are dangerous for authors to be associated with, but there are also some that might work well with one person but not work well with me. Sometimes it's more about personal preference. So far as those predatory practices, though, I want to make sure I mention Writers Beware. Writers Beware is a website. If you're not aware of it, it's a great place to start when you're considering working with a publisher. You can literally type in the search term, the name of the publisher you're looking at. And if that site has had complaints from authors or about their business practices, there's going to be an article there detailing it for you. And you can see when it happened too, because it's possible for a publishing house to go through a bad time and handle it badly and come back from it, and a few years later be doing decent business. Somebody else is in charge now, or they learned. But it's also possible that they didn't learn. So you need to look at what happened and when it happened, I think is very important.
There's a forum on the Absolute Right message boards for where you can research publishers as well. It's the Absolute Right water cooler.
Mhm.
And I forget what it's called because I haven't been there in a while, but you can absolutely go and say, hey, I've been offered a contract from Prospective Press. Does anybody have any experience working with them? And they'll say, yes, Jason wears funny Hawaiian shirts to conventions. He's great.
Yeah, your sweatshirt is awfully tame today, Jason.
Hey, basic black. It works for. I already have a busy background, so you know.
So Michelle, how about you? When you're looking, you've got work, you're going to submit it. What are warning signs for you? What would make you be like, I'm not sure I want to work with these people?
I think everything that people have already identified. You know, when I was first starting out, I would go to publishers' websites because, you know, anyone can basically say, like Joe Blow can be like, I'm doing an anthology, you know, and put up a website. And I think when you're new, you're just so eager for someone to validate your work. And if you are not paying attention, all of the red flags that people have mentioned, you know, what is the level of publishers' engagement? What do the book covers look like? What can you find their authors? What else are their authors doing? You know, where are they kind of connected? But I also wanted to bring up something related to contracts. So contracts, not just for big projects for novellas and novels, but contracts when you sign a contract just for your story and an edited collection. Please read those contracts. Please talk to other writers about those contracts. Know that you have you know, resources out there to find out what should be in a contract. And I did this, you know, when I was working with Book Smugglers, which was a wonderful press. I got a lawyer. I mean, it was my first larger publication, and had the lawyer look over it. And don't be afraid to do that with, you know, novels and novellas, but also even with anthologies. And I'll just tell on myself. This publisher is not someone we've mentioned, not someone on this panel, but last year I signed a contract for to put in a story, and it was, you know, everything was great. But then when I actually look closer at the contract, they are holding the story for 5 years, which is a little bit longer than than what, you know, usually you get, you know, 1 year and or right after publication it reverts to you. And I had sort of missed that because it was a, you know, well-known kind of publisher. And anyway, I feel like, you know, do your due diligence at every stage. That's part of being a professional author.
Since we're telling on ourselves, I literally had to email a publisher early this year to say, when do my rights come back? And they said, we published that anthology in 2017. I said, yes, I know. But I didn't pay very much attention, and I wrote it because a friend of mine said you were cool. So when do I get my rights back? Do I have them? They said, yeah, as soon as you got them back on publication. I said, thanks. But yeah, I didn't read my contract well. But 5 years? Wow.
That's crazy.
It's a hot mess. I am going to
We asked for 6 months of exclusivity.
Penguin is only holding exclusivity on my story for them for 2.
Huh. Yikes.
Yeah, live and learn, people. Don't make the same mistake.
But if anybody
You know,
else
another thing too,
that's a word, you can have 2 years too.
another thing too is getting to what you just said, Michelle, about having somebody look over your contract, is if you can find somebody who is a publishing attorney, so much the better, because one of the authors that I work with, some of her early work was published by a smaller New York house. And when I picked up one of the copies of her books from them, I noticed that the copyright wasn't in her name. It was in the name of the publishing company. And I said, no, this is wrong. And so I asked if she had a copy of her contract with them, and she did. And there were 9 words in the contract that assigned the copyright to the company, to the publishing company. And she said, oh, I had my lawyer look over it, and he said, it's fine. I said, oh, no, they own your copyright. Your name's on the cover, but they own your book.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can find somebody who is a specialist in entertainment law or specifically in publishing, so much the better.
Passive guy.
What's that?
The Passive Voice blog is a publishing blog written by a literary IP attorney.
Ah, good.
And his pseudonym is Passive Guy. His real name's on the website somewhere, I don't remember, but he will do contract review. And if I remember, I vaguely remember the rates being reasonable. It's been a long time since I looked, but look up Passive Voice blog, and he has a tab for contract review.
And this is something, so when you are looking at your contract, like I'm also going to tell myself, I have a story coming out in an anthology and I didn't really actually look at the contract. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do what I did. Don't follow my bad example. Look at the contract, because then, you know, when you do have a question like that, for me, I'm only ever going to ask authors for rights that I intend to exercise at the time of publication. So we're not doing audiobooks yet because I haven't found a way to do it cost effectively. So all I ask for in the full-length anthologies is to be able to print it, to put it into an ebook format, and that's what we have. For the mini anthologies, those are going to be digital only. And I know that some of my authors didn't read their contracts because they were like, is there going to be paperback? I'm like, no, I don't have your print rights. All I have are your digital rights. I was like, someday, maybe, let's see how it goes. But yeah, definitely, if you have a contract that's asking you for more rights than the publisher intends to use at the time of publication, maybe have that conversation with them. And if you don't have to sign that right to them, maybe to have a talk about taking that verbiage out of the contract. So say you want to do an audiobook of something, there you go.
Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been a great conversation, and I always enjoy talking with you, and I hope that our viewers feel like they learned a little bit about small press publishing. So in our last couple of minutes, I'm just going to go around and ask everybody to say again briefly who you are and where we can find your work, so that anybody who was very impressed with what you said could go look you up. So Rachel, can I start with you?
Sure. For the things that I'm writing, my website is infamousscribbler.com. And if you enjoy short horror fiction, then check out cronegirlspress.com and come visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/cronegirls.
Thank you so much. How about you, Jason?
I'm Jason Graves, and it's Prospective Press. I'm going to hold this up. Hopefully you can read that. Prospective. Yeah, and it's just www.prospectivepress.com is our website, and it does need to be updated. I apologize for that, but you know, you can find most of the information about us there, or you can come to Facebook and look up Prospective Press group page, or you know, drop me a line. I'm under Prospective Press, so, and Jason T. Graves.
All right, thank you. And Michele, how about you?
Michele Tracy Berger at Michele T. Berger, Berger at Twitter. Come find me and talk with me there. I also host a blog for writers, primarily called The Practice of Creativity. That's michelleberger.wordpress.com. Yes, it's long and I should own my own domain name, but we do things as we do them. And I'm happy to have been published with all of these wonderful people. You can find my work in their various anthologies and my novella, Renew You. Thanks, John, because I'm in a different room, so I didn't have it with me. Thank you.
That's why I turned the camera off.
Thanks.
Nikki.
Okay, so John, tell us who you are and where we can find you and your work.
You can find me at falstaffbooks.com. You can find my work also at johnhartness.com, facebook.com/John G. Hartness, or you can, for more interaction with me and with our other authors, you can join our Facebook group, which is called the Misfit Toys, and you can pick up Samantha's books, the Menopausal Superhero series, in paperback and digital and hardcover from that website, and same with Michele's book. And A few of mine too, sure, whatever.
You only have one or two.
A couple. It's been a light year. I think I've only released 3.
Yeah.
And I again am Samantha Bryant. You can find my website at the very creatively named samanthabryant.com. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Samantha B Writer. That's just the letter B in the middle. And where you can see my pictures of mushrooms and creek beds and see what's irritating me today. So I hope you will seek us out, make contact. We'd love to talk to writers at all levels, and good luck in whatever you choose for your publishing journey. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.